You know, folks, I've covered several stories here on the channel about women who, since Roe versus Wade got overturned, wasn't able to get the health care that they needed, and a lot of times ended up losing their lives because of it. And these stories are always tragic, and I always dread covering them, honestly, but I do to raise awareness on the issue. I've always said in every one of those videos that these things would have to happen to Republicans before they would care. But in this next story, it did happen to a Republican who then found a way to turn and blame it on Democrats. And no, I'm not making this up, but if you haven't heard the story, I think it's one worth covering. This was Republican lawmaker Cammack out of Florida. I'm going to be reading here from WCJB ABC. Representative Cammack opens up about ectopic presidency sparking debate over Florida abortion law. So I'm going to read a little bit of it right here. North Central Florida U.S. Representative Cammack recently shared the challenges she faced getting treatment for a life-threatening pregnancy complication, sparking a debate over Florida's 6-week abortion ban. Congresswoman Cammack, a Republican, spoke exclusively with the Wall Street Journal about a pregnancy she had expelled in May of 2024, shortly after the state abortion law went into effect. Doctors informed her that she had an ectopic pregnancy, which occurs when a fertilized egg implants outside of a woman's uterus. The condition is fatal for the unborn baby and can be life-threatening for the mother. Cammack explained that the medical professionals in Florida initially refused to terminate the 5-week-old pregnancy due to fears they would be violating state law, which took effect earlier that month. In order to convince the hospital staff, she pulled up the law on her phone and even tried to call the governor's office. Hours later, doctors gave her methotrexate to expel the embryo. The Congresswoman placed the blame not on state law, which allows abortions and related procedures to protect the life of the mother, but on pro-choice messaging. It was absolute fear-mongering at its worst, she told the publication. There will be some comments like, well, thank God we have abortion services, even though what I went through wasn't an abortion. I can't pronounce this county. Democratic Party jumped on the story as a showcase of how criminalizing abortion with vague laws creates situations where doctors are afraid to act. Representative Cammack's ectopic pregnancy put her life at risk, and her treatment was delayed because of the very abortion ban that she supported. Doctors were too scared to treat her, even if she couldn't get care. What hope is there for the rest of us? The Congresswoman's office provided TV20 the following statement in response to our request to comment on this story. Congresswoman Cammack highlighted the critical women's health crisis in America, particularly the shortage of maternal health resources and risk of politicizing health care. Her personal story illustrates how treating women's health as a political issue endangers lives. Misinformation campaigns funded by pro-abortion groups have intentionally confused healthcare providers, despite the law being clear on exceptions for rape, incest, victims of trafficking, and the life of the mother. These dangerous pro-abortion ads contributed to delays that endangered her life. Since the Wall Street Journal's article, she has received dozens of credible death threats against her family, her unborn child, and her family, and herself, which are being investigated by the U.S. Capitol Police. Cammack's experience underscores the unacceptable reality that sharing a personal health story in an effort to improve women's health care can lead to violence and intimidation. Women deserve better, as does the National Health Care Dialogue. Cammack, a co-chair of the House Pro-Life Caucus, opposes abortion in many circumstances. However, she believes the procedures are acceptable when the mother's life is at risk, and in the cases of rape or incest, she is pregnant again, and her due date is this summer. But I'm going to go back and play you here an older clip where she talks about how that abortion is not health care, and then we're going to talk more about this. Take a look.
Now, I think to do that, you've got to have 60 votes. Do you think there are 60 votes in the Senate to codify abortion and make it legal across the country again?
No, Stu, I don't think there's 60 votes. Heck, I don't even think that they have 50 votes. You have people on the Democratic side who have campaigned and run as pro-life Democrats. You know, I heard on my way here to this interview from a Democratic colleague that this is an assault on women's health care. Abortion is not health care. And let me be clear. Codifying Roe v. Wade would mean that a woman could abort her child up until the day before delivery. That is a entirely different conversation than what I think Americans are prepared to have. Are we seriously going to consider allowing the murder of an entirely full-grown, functioning, breathing, thinking infant? That's what that means. They want to abort children the day before delivery. That is what codifying Roe would mean. There's not 60 votes. Heck, there's probably not even 50. And I think it's clear that the court has rectified this. It's been a decades-long error, and now we are returning this back to the states where it has always belonged. Today is a great day for life. Yesterday was a great day for the Second Amendment. The court is getting it right as Congress continues to get it wrong.
So there she was back in 2022 doing what she's accusing the left of doing now, which is spreading misinformation. Folks, I don't know anyone out there who wants to abort a child the day before it's born. As I was sitting there listening to that, I would not have been one bit surprised if she had have just rolled right on into, they're murdering the babies after they're born and all the crazy stuff that Donald Trump said on the campaign trail, and was able to get away with it. But here she was, her life was threatened. I'm glad she made it. I'm glad she got the care she needed, but she's out there opposing other women getting that care, and then wants to turn around and find a way to twist it, to blame it on the left, to say that the left is creating all this hysteria and creating all this confusion. Well, then why don't they come out and make things more clear if that's the claim they're going to make? They won't, because they're not for women getting the care that they need. They're not for women being able to make their own choices. They want someone to be able to make those choices for them. There she's doing the classic Republican argument, which is, well, we'll just kick it back to the states. And I always argue this, and I will argue this till the day I die, folks. It should be no other person's decision except the woman, and she should, consult with her doctor and make the decision based on what the doctor told her. And no one out there should have any say, myself included, anyone included, the father of the child included. No one out there should have any say in it but her. So I will always stand against that kicking it back to the states argument. That's just an old argument that the Confederacy used to love to use all those years ago, and it's been something that's been handed down for years, and they'll always use it in an attempt to sound like they know what they're talking about when in reality they don't. Again, I'm glad she made it. I'm glad she got the care she needed, but there's a whole lot of women who have actually died, and we've covered it here on the channel. There's women who have been kept alive and used as incubators so that the child could be born. We've covered some of the most heartbreaking, horrendous stories, and it's not to create hysteria or to spread misinformation. It's to raise awareness on what's going on out there in the world. And yeah, doctors are afraid to give care to women, but they're afraid to give care to women based on the laws that are on the books. And it's not us that is stirring the pot. If women had the right to make their own medical decisions and had access to the procedures they needed, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. And that's the main point I would like to make about this. If things had been left in place for women to have, and everyone had have minded their own damn business and kept their noses out of it, again, a woman making a decision over her own health care is none of no one's business but hers, and it does not affect you and how you feed your family. When I sit and figure my bills up and I figure out who I owe what, and I sit there and manage to put food on my table every day, the girl down the road that had to have a medical procedure, that had nothing to do with how I went about taking care of my family. And that's how I look at a lot of these issues. And that's why that, I think that when it comes to, Republicans, they always want to be sticking their nose into other people's business. But the gay person down the street doesn't affect how you live your life. The trans person down the street doesn't affect how you live your life. Live your life, live and let live. And if you believe in God, which I don't, but if you do, if you believe in God and you believe that people will, one day stand before God and answer for everything they ever did, then let God take care of that. Let him be the judge of it and go on about your day, because you're not going to get to be in charge. According to the Bible I read, the judgment day, God will oversee that. And, Jesus, they'll be the ones to oversee that. You're not going to have a say in it. You're not going to get a step forward in a day of judgment and say, oh, I know what she done once upon a time. Make sure she goes to hell. You're not going to get to make that decision. You're not going to get to make that decision in your phony afterlife, so you shouldn't be making it here in the real world for the rest of us. And it's just so crazy to me that in this moment where she found herself, in need of help, that she could find a way to then turn it and blame it on the opposite side instead of maybe looking in the mirror and going, a lot of these policies that I got behind and a lot of these ideas that I've got behind and pushed, maybe other women didn't get the care they needed, and maybe those other women died. Maybe those other women weren't able to get Ron DeSantis on the phone. But she never stops and thinks about that because they're always thinking about themselves and they're always thinking about a way to demonize or vilify someone else. But I'm for her getting the care she needed, and I'm against anyone threatening her or threatening her life or things like that. Reasonable people are against those kind of things. But reasonable people are also for seeing women get the care that they need and be able to make the decisions on their own. I will always say this, it shouldn't be about states' rights or the country's rights or anyone's rights except that woman when she sits down to talk with her doctor and comes to the conclusion she comes to, which a lot of times, folks, is a very painful decision to make, but it should be hers. It should be no one else's.